All right. We're going to kind of continue on today with our new Mod 7 section. So, get this up. Okay, so I thought we'd start today looking at the economic freedom map, just to kind of get a little bit more detail. So, again, one of our graduates from this fine university, Jim Gortney, went on to create this tool that analyzes economic freedom around the world. And so this book is in digital form on the Fraser Institute website, freetheworld.org. So if you want to write in your notes, so you're going to keep notes again today that you'll be turning in. So part of your final project that you can do can be related to this. So this is, if you put freetheworld.com, that is the site that brings you to this thing. And what this thing is that measurement of economic freedom. And so it's color coded so that the most free countries out of the, who remembers how many countries we got on the list? 162. Nice, Kaylin. That's probably worth an extra credit point. Hold that. What a memory like a steel trap. I didn't even have it remembered that well. So, okay, so 162 countries, and they break them into quartiles. So on your sheet here, all the countries are listed. This is from 2011, so this is an older ranking here, but all the countries are listed from the most free to the least free. And so what we mean by quartiles is that a fourth of them, the top countries that are the fourth, are the most free countries, then the next free, and then the bottom quartile is the least free. And so color coding, the red is the least free, and then this kind of green color, they start to look a little bit, but here's China over here. So China's in the third quartile, India is in the second quartile. And so that is a map of the world, and you can scroll over it to see what the ranking are. So the United States in the most recent rankings, which is this book, this is the most recent ranking, was ranked 5th. With a score, a number of 8.19. 8.19 was their number. So there was 162 countries. For each of those countries, there's 42 variables that are broken down into 5 areas. And then all that data is just kind of slowly distilled down by using averages, is mostly their technique, to a single number. And that single number for the United States is 8.19. And then what's kind of nice is you can then look around the world. So here's Sudan, 160. Their score is a 4.67. And so they're right near the bottom in Sudan. Here's Venezuela, the one at the bottom. So they're 162, and a 2.58 is their number after looking at all the information. But you can see a lot of Europe here. The England, United Kingdom is 7th. Here's Spain, Germany, and you can just kind of scroll around. Anybody got a country they want me to pick off?
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe. You might have to help me. Zimbabwe. There it is. 145th. 5.69 is their freedom ranking. Another country?
Chad. Honduras.
Honduras. Yeah, Honduras is kind of an interesting case here. So Guatemala is ranked 34th. Since I brought up Guatemala, If you remember in the fall, I did have a student opportunity for a student trip, and I just booked it. I'm going to be teaching at University Francisco Marroquín, a special course for the first 2 weeks. And so if you want to consider taking an econ class or going to Guatemala with me, that trip would be open. It's going to be May 25th, essentially. I think we leave the 23rd, and then we're there for 2 weeks. So that's an opportunity to travel to Guatemala. I'm hoping to have additional student trips in the future, but we kind of talked about it then. And my wife has a nonprofit organization that she works with, so you go into the indigenous areas and really explore. Guatemala is so gorgeous. It's like Hawaii type climate. It's just beautiful, plush plants and trees everywhere, and big mountains, and it's just really a gorgeous place. All right, so that you can talk to me privately. In fact, I'm going to start you'll start seeing it on the bright sign in the the Guatemala offering. So that'll be coming out again, but we kind of have to act soon if we want to do something of an exchange or something there. So Honduras is the next door neighbor here, and that is 63. So they are in the second quartile, and a score of 7.16. And so somebody else said Chad. Let's see, you might have to help me out with the geography. I can't remember where Chad is. There it is. Found it. 150th on Chad, whoever said that. Any other countries? Yeah?
Why is one great?
Why is what?
Why is one great?
Oh, some of them are great. Great question. Greenland has 0 score. So they don't have data. So all the countries that are analyzed are ones that have data to go with. Another notable exception of gray here, let's just go to the gray countries. There's not too many of them. You guys know about this story here? The Democratic Republic of Korea. Oh, wait a second, I thought Korea was all commercialized. Oh, Korea is 33, but this Korea is gray. What's the difference in the Koreas? North Korea. So North Korea, Kim Jong-un doesn't play nice with giving data. He likes to be real protective of letting anybody know what's exactly going on in North Korea. But all reports are that it isn't great, right, in his little communist regime over there. And then we got Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, I can't remember how to do that, and Uzbekistan. So kind of some of these over here, and then some other African nations here, a couple of them, Somalia. So there's just not information. Good question. Anything else?
What about Germany?
Germany's up near the top, 20th, 7.8. So it's kind of fun to go back, and so part of what you guys can do is pick a country and do some stuff on it. We'll talk about that later. I just wanted to introduce you to the map. The other thing then that you can do is compare some countries. So let's do the ones you guys said so far, or some of them. We can only do 5 at a time, but just United States let's have as one, and you can see how the map changes as we go. What do we have? Honduras and Zimbabwe. And what else did you just did Germany, was it Chad, I guess? And let's do Germany, I guess. So you can pick these out, and then it allows you to go back and look at information specific to them. And so there's their score over time from 1970 all the way to the most recent data of 2017. Some countries become more free, some countries become less free as their policies change over time. And so Honduras is one for sure that's rose through the ranks through the 80s over time, and some of them stay flat. And then these are the 5 categories: size of government, legal system, sound money, access to sound money. So now you can see, like here, this is, let's see, I want to make sure my color is right here. That's Zimbabwe. So remember when we did the hyperinflation thing? So they had really bad money for a period of time. And then what did they do that made this thing shoot up? Dollarization. So then all of a sudden their money became really sound because they were using US dollars rather than their own currency. So that's sound money. Freedom to trade internationally. We see some fluctuations. There might have been some policy changes here that we allow more free trade. Maybe we've reduced tariffs or something. Countries can change over time. And then regulation. So those are the 5 areas that we're picking off of as we kind of work through this content. And let me go back to the world one. Let's see, I can't remember how I can get rid of all these. Another kind of fun thing to do is to see what's happened over time. Over time, we've seen countries become more free in general. I'm going to hit play, and it's going to take us through time from 1970. No data, no data. Once we get to the 80s, then we started to get data. Red, here's some yellow, but then they turn red, right? So over time, these countries are changing and morphing depending on what policies they're following. And so this last section of macro, what we're going to be focusing in on are, what are these policies, right? What are the types of areas and policies as we finish out the course here, getting into fiscal policy, and now we can use this as a springboard to think about different areas. All right, any last questions here? All right, so on your notes, we're going to continue on with our note-taking here. So section 2.2, and by the way, I'm going to have, you guys are going to have the access code to access this book and this content here Monday at the latest. You might see an email from me. You don't have to do too much, but you have to enter in a code, and then you're going to have basically what I'm showing you is the digital version again of this book along with all the embedded videos. And so you're going to have access to that as part of our materials, especially as we get in more so into next week. All right, so we're going to do this little Walmart one here. So again, those of you who weren't here last time, you're getting points for taking some notes. So each one of these will do some note taking. I was pretty easy on your note taking this last time because my work study student was busy and we had to kind of wrestle through. But we are going to look at the notes that you're taking, not necessarily read it, because we don't need to read all of it. But my point is, with each section, I do want you to have some stuff down with each video section, takeaways. All right, here we go.
In every one of Walmart's thousands of stores, they begin the day with the Walmart cheer. This is supposed to inspire employees and remind them the customer comes first. These workers told us they like working here, but others say they're victims, that Walmart is exploiting them. Some people just hate Walmart. Critics say Walmart wrecks communities, discriminates against women, doesn't provide enough health benefits, and underpays its workers.
Don't stop the monster in its tracks.
Walmart doesn't want to listen. A new movie depicts Walmart as a greedy beast. It's grabbing everything in its path. There's so much Walmart hatred, some towns vote to keep Walmart out.
Does it look like the reporter even smiled? The message is loud and clear. Walmart, you are not welcome.
This big union-led campaign intends to force Walmart to stop being greedy.
They're greedy.
I just think greed doesn't go far enough.
Their most common classification.
Paul Blank was hired by the Food and Commercial Workers Union to convince people not to shop at Walmart until Walmart pays workers more.
For 1 penny increase, they could provide their workers with $2 more in wages and benefits. So look at what they make. The average associate at Walmart makes $8.23 an hour. That's not a job that can support a family.
Walmart says the average is about $1 an hour, more than that, but it's still not a lot.
They've taken the values, the morals, the ethics, fairness that are the fabric of our society, and put them aside and put their profits before their people.
Walmart now has 6,000 stores, and they sell more goods than any chain anywhere.
I'm actually saving a good $40, and I like that. Everything today I got was an incredibly low price.
Consumer savings in the United States because of Walmart may be as high as $100 billion a year. This translates really into a wage increase that Walmart is offering to all Americans that shop there.
The critics keep talking about greed. Greedy Walmart taking from people.
Greed is a smear for profit seeking and for successful. Would it be nice if Walmart workers all made $100,000 a year? Sure. It would also be nice if the rivers were filled with lemonade and every kid had a puppy dog and a lollipop. But in reality, we have trade-offs.
Welcome to Walmart. You don't have any faces, kids?
Walmart keeps costs down by hiring retired workers like Gene Allen.
Have a good day.
Many other workers here are part-time or students or people looking for a second income.
None of them was drafted. None of them was forced to work at Walmart. That means that if they're working there, presumably that was the best job they could get. If Walmart ceased to exist tomorrow, those people wouldn't be better off. They'd have to work somewhere with even lower wages, even fewer benefits.
But the protesters say Walmart is evil.
Every single major advance in mass retail, our storms of protest. The first department stores in downtown were hated and vilified. When Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward started the mail order business, rural retailers went crazy because of the unfair competition. When A&P and other chain stores came into existence, they actually passed laws to try to stop them.
The critics say Walmart's greed is not good.
Ultimately, they have to answer to the American people.
But they are answering to their customers because 100 million people go there to shop.
But we're only at the beginning of this campaign.
It's easy for people who have plenty to say that, oh, I'd be willing to pay a few cents more. But for people who are struggling to make ends meet, Walmart is their best friend.
Even some of the political left have begun to defend Walmart, like President Clinton's labor secretary, Robert Reich.
What's all the hatred about? It's intense hatred. It represents the dark side of big business to a lot of people. They're fighting unions. They're doing everything they can to get their costs down. And that looks unfair. It looks awful. We don't like it. The citizen in us says that's not moral. But the other side of the coin is that those same companies are providing rock bottom prices to consumers. And we as consumers say, hooray.
Okay, so get your last notes down there on competition. So here's your quiz question here. Make this a little bigger. So competition is important for the market because it keeps producers accountable to consumers by which one? Keeping prices high, quality low, keeping prices high, quality high, keeping prices low and quality high, keeping prices low and quality low. What do you think? A, B, C, or D? C. So why though? I think that's put this question down. Profits before people. You heard him say that. You've probably heard it plenty of times before. Profits before people. Does Walmart put profits before people? What people are being overlooked, perhaps, when we make a comment like that? The consumers. So that's certainly one thing. So consumers are being overlooked. What was the point of the video in terms of how the Walmart employees might even be gaining?
Because that's the best job that they can find.
Okay, so best job that they can find. So nobody's forcing them to work there, first of all, right? So they have other opportunities. So that voluntary part of the market system, competitive system. And so if there is competition in the labor market, then if wages could be higher without having profits completely disappear, then somebody would induce them away from Walmart, right? And so as long as there's competition, we'll get people moving to where they'll get paid the most, given their circumstances and skills. So is profit, should Walmart be a non-profit? What would be the harm with that? Or is the profit that they're making really obnoxious profits? How do we know that they're not making too much money? I guess is one way to look at it. How do we know Walmart's not making too much money? I'm not going to Google it or anything, but let's say it's $20 billion, right? So how do we know if that's fair, that Walmart isn't taking advantage of its employees and other things? Dominic?
There's other companies that are doing the same thing.
Okay, there's other companies doing the same thing. So kind of in terms of that competition part, if they were obnoxiously high profits, what would also need to be true about some of the things going on with their products? What would also be high or obnoxiously high if they had super high profits? The prices, right? So the prices would be high. Now, if they're getting profits that are obnoxious or abnormally high, and they're doing it because their prices are high, now we're getting back to Dominic's comment of, if there's competition, somebody else is able to take that business away from them by having lower prices. And then Walmart says, oh, well, we can do lower than that, we can do lower than that, we can do lower than that. And so in a competitive market system, we'd expect prices to be normal and fair, I would go so far to say. That the profits that Walmart is earning is fair, even if they're $20 billion. We don't really know how much money they're risking to make the $20 billion, right? How much money is actually at stake each day, and what the payroll is, and all of the risks associated with running a business. We just learned that it's $20 billion. So as an economist, I sit back and I say, $20 billion, that sounds like a lot, but I guess it's probably not. If Target and Amazon, and you go down the list, we got all these other guys trying to do the exact same thing. So if they made $20 billion, it's probably a fair return for their investment. It's a fair profit, right? And in order to stay competitive, they need to have wages at a competitive rate. If they start to pay their people more, what has to happen to their prices? They go up. What happens to their business? It goes down, right? It all just kind of harmonizes. So we can kind of use our economic logic that we're learning. And those of you, that's a little bit more of a microeconomic basis, but it's important at this level to say that we're going to get some good results for the macroeconomy if we have healthy forms of competition. So let's kind of write that out in your notes. So write down profits before people, question mark. And one thing is, I guess let's put the answer as no. With competition, workers are paid at least what their next best alternative is. Sorry, I'm getting over here a little bit. I'll try to switch over to the other side. So no, with competition, workers are paid at least what their next best alternative is. They don't have to work. There. It is voluntary. The choice to work. No, I have to work there because I have to pay my bills and I have, right? Well, that's a personal finance problem if you found yourself in a position where you have to pick up the extra job, but you still have other alternatives of where you can work. So the other part then that we'd add is that profits are kept in check with competition. Profits are kept in check with competition. If a market is competitive, then the long run profit for a firm is a normal or reasonable profit. If a market is competitive, then the long run profit for a firm is a normal or reasonable profit. And then we might finally say that consumers are people too, and so people get low prices. So these people are consumers. So we do have two people at play here with a comment like profits before people. Well, Walmart could argue, well, we've got the lowest prices in town. We're serving our customers. We're serving consumers. We're serving people, right? Us being able to keep things down and to keep wages competitive allows us to serve people better, to get low prices. Okay, so any last comments or questions on the competition? One thing to note that the author does here in the book with the writing, it's important to note that competition is not pro-business. So when you say, I'm for capitalism or I'm for competition, you are not for business necessarily, because guess what? Do businesses like competition? No. It's different to be pro-business. Your particular business, you want to stop the competition. You want to beat the competition. You want to avoid the competition, right? So your incentives, you'll make more money if you keep competition away. So being pro-market or pro-capitalism or pro is not the same as being pro-business. We're not looking out for the interests of the business, but rather we're looking out for competition so that we get this result. Low prices for consumers, competitive wages, better alternatives for our people in terms of opportunities for earning money, that sort of thing. Okay. So let's see, we're going to skip that one. Move on to the next section. So each one of these are different sections on stuff. So now we're going to get into government, capital markets, and monetary stability. And so this first section is on government regulation, which is one of the 5 areas of the Economic Freedom Index. So what we're doing is we're kind of using these videos and support to kind of show why the index that we looked at makes sense and where it comes from and how they monitor that. So this one's called regulation. So on your notes, if you just put regulation video or whatever, this one's a little bit shorter, 3 minutes.
Regulation. There ought to be a law. These days, it seems to be the first thing people demand to solve problems that may not even exist. Might seem like a good idea to make male and female teens pay the same rate for car insurance. In fact, the European Court of Justice has mandated that insurance premiums must be gender neutral. But this means that safer female drivers like Beth will now pay much more to make up for the lower premiums now being offered to less responsible young male drivers like Seth. Regulation often appears to be an easy fix, but it's critical to consider the unintended consequences. Regulations often reduce gains from trade. Remember, trade is a mutually beneficial proposition. Both parties win. But regulations often impact the economy in ways that weren't considered at first. Good old secondary effects again. For example, laws that make it more costly to dismiss an employee also make it riskier to hire one in the first place. That means the cost of hiring a new worker goes up. When costs go up, What happens? If I can't fire you, I can't hire you. It's not worth the risk of being stuck with an employee that might not work out. Now I'll hire only employees with a superior skill set, refusing to take risks on young people or those with lesser skill sets. So places with regulations that make it harder to dismiss employees nearly always have higher levels of unemployment than do places where the labor markets are less regulated. Some people argue that regulations are necessary to make sure businesses serve the interests of consumers, but we've already learned that it's in a business's best interest to serve their consumers well if they want to make a profit. Sometimes regulation is called for in the interest of public safety, usually through occupational licensing laws. While such laws might be necessary in dangerous or very technical professions, are they really necessary for cab drivers, flower arrangers, hair washers, and hair braiders? Many states think so. In the 1950s, fewer than 5% of professionals required a license. Today, according to the Department of Labor, over 29% require a licensure. Have professions really become that much more dangerous? Or is it more likely that trade groups have discovered that occupational licensure can be used to restrict competition and drive up earnings? Now we have a mutually beneficial relationship created at the expense of the greater good. The industry lobbies for and gains the political power to screen out competition, and politicians carve out a well-organized constituency who will vote for them in the future, all in the name of public safety. And the secondary effect is increased unemployment. Those already in the business often approve licensure requirements. For example, in states that regulate flower arranging, imagine the harm from unregulated flower arranging. The judges are usually other florists. They seek licensure not so much to protect the consumer as to protect their own turf. There's a cost to comply with all regulations. Too much regulation influences the prices of goods and services, and when cost goes up, fewer people buy and fewer get hired. Capital, in this case labor, is being blocked from entering a particular occupation. Competition is limited, and the consumer pays the price.
Okay, so I'd like to hear from you guys this time. What was some of your notes you took that you got? What do you think was an important point for that you found interesting? Yeah?
That too much regulation makes cost.
Okay, good. So regulation comes at a cost, right? So there is a price to it. And so similar to wages going up, if there's some sort of regulation that you have to change the way you're doing things, that usually adds some sort of cost. They're not out there to add cost-saving measures, like we're going to add a regulation, somehow that saves you cost. It's going to add cost. Okay, another person? Another guy.
You know, the way like regulation, a way of protecting certain way.
Yeah, the protecting the turf thing is where we're going to have some other videos too, that really what might be going on is what I just said about being pro-business versus pro-competition. And that trade groups or existing producers might want to have licensing or some sort of thing because it creates a barrier to entry. It actually will reduce their competition. Okay, so I heard this regulation is necessary to protect the public. Go ahead and write that question down in your notes. Is regulation necessary or regulation necessary to protect the public? So here's what people kind of say is like, oh yeah, we believe in market capitalism, but you know, we got those greedy people that are going to do awful things. They're always just so selfish. They're going to look out for themselves. And so we need to have regulations to make sure they're following the rules and treating people nice, right? We need regulations to regulate this unruly animal greed of business owners always trying to do that. So my challenge to you then is, what is it necessary, or does the market kind of self-regulate to some? How does the market self-regulate to some extent?
If people don't like what a business is doing, they lose their consumers and then they go
Good.
out of business.
Yeah, so that's one mechanism, right? Is that if a business does a bad thing, or they don't treat their customers right, or they don't make a high quality product, then people don't go there. And is that more so today than in the past? Like, let's go 20 years ago. Do consumers have more power and more knowledge in that regard today as compared to 20 years ago? Yeah, how?
They may have more information, but I think they care less.
But in terms of evaluating the business, do we sometimes, you got to be careful because there's haters out there too that are just telling lies. But for the most part, if before you go buy something, you do a quick review, is this a 5-star, 4-star, whatever, all of a sudden you've got input from other consumers. And so if a company's not treating their customers right, they're not going to get the business and they're going to be pushed out of the market. So that's what we call market discipline. That is the market kind of cracking the whip of, hey, businesses, you're going to just go away if you don't do things right. And so in many respects, the market already is self-regulated if it's competitive. So then again, we can kind of fall back on our thing similar to what I did with profits to say, is that profit fair? Well, how's the competition? We can also say, is that market serving their customers right, or is there a problem, or do we need to protect the public? Is there competition? If there's competition and consumers have knowledge, then we might not need to really protect with some sort of licensing or other mechanism. Question? Yeah.
Oh, but also in certain circumstances, say for like fishing,
Yeah.
no one's going to stop the company from overfishing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, for sure. So yeah, I don't want to say we want to go completely unregulated, right? So it's kind of like, where are we at today? What does the landscape look like? Do we have too much or too little? Are there places where we could turn things over to the market and maybe get better results than just adding on another law or another regulation? There are certainly places like the overfishing example of public goods where we might not be able to have, we don't want complete anarchy, right? And so the fishing example is the tragedy thing. What was that called in the last video? I think we just did that in this class. I could be confusing it with one of my other classes. It was a tragedy of the, it was that one. Remember, tragedy of the commons, yeah. So if we have a common resource like an ocean, then we might have problems. So really what's lacking in that case is having property rights identified. And that's where, in the case of fishing, I'm glad you brought it up, that the government can help encourage competition through selling transferable permits is one of the solutions that has come out with that. And so it actually is fostering competition in what would otherwise be an overused common good. And so there are ways that we can, again, kind of turn to the market to maybe find some solutions. All right, any other last comments or questions there? Got a couple other little cool videos. So this one you can put on your notes is DC, the DC City Study.
Just about everyone knows that government at every level is requiring more and more Americans to get a government-issued license before they can earn an honest living. In the 1950s, where only about 1 in 20 Americans needed the government's blessing to do their job. Today, that number is more than 1 in 3, and government puts all kinds of requirements on would-be entrepreneurs, making it harder for these entrepreneurs to start and grow small businesses. Entrepreneurs like Chuck here. This is Chuck. Oh, Chuck hates his job, but Chuck has an idea.
I'm going to fix computers in my garage and sell them for low prices.
Chuck.
My business will create new jobs for my community.
Chuck, old boy.
And give more young people access to computers. Then once my business really gets going, I can expand into a commercial space and use the new one.
So, actually, in Milwaukee, starting a business in your home means you can't work in your garage, can't have any employees, can't have any signs, and can't take deliveries.
What?
Unless you come up with the money for a commercial lease right away, you won't be starting your business at all.
Well, if Milwaukee won't have me, I'm going to start my business somewhere else.
That's the spirit.
What Los Angeles needs is a good used bookstore.
Actually, believe it or not, Los Angeles treats used bookshops like they were strip clubs or gun shops. You need a permit from the police to operate. You'll have to be fingerprinted. Anyone who sells you books may need to be fingerprinted too. For every book you buy, you'll have to stamp it with an individualized number that corresponds to a bill of sale that identifies the book and who it came from. Police get to inspect those bills of sale and hold on. You'll also have to hold books for at least 30 days before you sell them, just in case the police have any questions.
But the First Amendment to the Constitution protects my...
The First
First Amendment. Well, how
These are true stories.
Hey,
by the
you're
way.
not planning on selling that copy of the Constitution to anyone, are you, Chuck?
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Balloon advertising? Well, that's an idea that's on the rise. Maybe you're onto something here, Chuck. But remember, Chuck, entrepreneurs aren't the only ones who have ideas. Bureaucrats have them too.
Here in Houston, you're only allowed to use balloons to sell cars, or if you have a message that doesn't sell anything at all.
That's ridiculous.
You're right. All balloons now banned in Houston.
Maybe Houston just ain't your kind of place, Chuck. How about DC? Oh, want to be an interior designer, huh? Not too bad. Not too bad at all. But in Washington, D.C., you'll need a license before you can tell people where to put those paintings, pillars, and planters.
But that doesn't make any sense.
Actually, that makes a ton of sense. And dollars, too. You see, existing interior designers lobbied the city to make all new interior designers, none of the current ones, take a test and pay a bunch of money to go into the interior design business. It's a win-win for the industry and the government. Interior designers get to keep out the competition, and government gets to make money. Don't go ruining a good thing by trying to lower prices for consumers now. Now you're talking, Chuck. Miami, nice and sunny down there. Valencia oranges, lots of tourists too. You want to be a street vendor, huh? Well, you just need to get a little old permission slip from the city government. Ready, Chuck? Let's go. Here's all you'll need.
An occupational license from the city of Miami. An occupational license from Miami-Dade County. A license from the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation if you want to sell prepared food, or if you want to sell prepackaged food, a license from the Florida Department of Agriculture. Or if you want to sell gum, another license from the city of Miami, the city of Miami tax certificate, the state of Florida tax certificate, a certification from the Florida Department of Revenue that all your taxes have been paid, a copy of the current Florida Department of Motor Vehicles registration for your car, a license plate for your car, a car certification form signed by 3 different bureaucrats in 3 different departments, and $500,000 in insurance coverage for any bodily injury or property damage caused by your event.
Got all your paperwork together, Chuck?
Yes.
Great. Now you're entitled to enter the street vendor lottery. If you're lucky enough to win, you'll be allowed to start your business. And the winner is, oh, not you. Tough luck, Chuck. This is still Chuck. He still hates his job. Any ideas, left guy?
Oh, I'm just going to sell the leftover stuff from my computer business and go back to my old job.
Actually,
What?
if you want to close a business in Milwaukee, you'll need a government-issued license for that, too. And you'll have to give the government an itemized inventory every day of everything you're selling. Sorry, guy, that's just the cost of doing business, or of going out of business.
Oh, I just give up.
Excellent. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go fix this unemployment problem.
Want to help people like Chuck? Visit www.ij.
All right. So I'm glad Derek brought up the common, regulating fishing places or whatever. You can see where this is going is very applied, down to the real world in terms of the little hoops people have to jump to get into different industries. So takeaways, give me a couple. Let me hear from some people I haven't heard from yet. What did you get in your notes?
In 1950, needed a license.
Yeah. So getting the government blessing, right? So we got to get the government, we got to register, we got to do something. So 1 in 20 versus 1 in 3, that's significant, right? So the whole idea, I don't know if we have a video in this content, I don't think we do, but have you guys heard of lemonade stands being shut down by 8-year-olds? That's due to government licensing. So there's places that'll have that on the books where they're literally showing up to an 8-year-old's lemonade stand and saying, well, I'm sorry, you have to have a wash station, you have to have a permit or whatever to even run a lemonade stand. How encouraging for entrepreneurship is that when we're putting little 8-year-olds having the police show up and say, well, that's just not the way we do business there. Did I see another hand up? Another comment, one more comment.
You need to have just tons of license, regulations, these departments to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so you're kind of referring to maybe pushing you out of your house. Yeah, so that's a big thing. Now, what's difficult sometimes with that is if you are running a business out of your garage and you have lots of traffic coming back and forth at all hours of the night, would your neighbors maybe be upset with that? Yeah, so that's where we're potentially do need some laws that might help protect other people's property, but it probably goes over the line if you're just going to work in your basement or something and not have the deliveries or whatever. You know what I mean? You can imagine there being some businesses that would still be respectful of your neighbors, but that's often not the case on the way those get put in. So yeah, the old idea of this is America, I can start a business and roll over tomorrow and work out of my house might not be possible. You might have to do some other things.
I hear that right, where it was like to go out of business, you need a license for that too.
Yeah, that was weird. So I think it was just a matter of selling off, and they want to know, they probably want their tax money on the sales of the things that you're selling was part of it. But yeah, that's kind of insane, isn't it? Going out of business, you need to check with the government. The more we have to check with the government, does that encourage entrepreneurship or not? Discourages, right? So it's a barrier. So what an economist would say, when we have competition, we look at what are the barriers to entry. So in perfect competition, we have basically free entry and exit. It's easy to start a business. It's hard and it's easy to get out. That's what we want in a competitive market. So if the government is doing things that reduce that, then that's going to cause some frictions. Yeah.
Do you think part of that is to try and keep people from making bad decisions of going and starting a business that they have no clue about and maybe incurring debt throughout that process?
I suspect that might be some motivations. I think it's more so of existing businesses protecting their turf. And then they lobby their politicians to get the laws passed. Oh, that person's dangerous. We can't have them working out of their house or something, right? There might be some people like, oh, we just want to protect you, right? And we're trying to help you out to make sure you don't, waste your money on this new business venture. Is that helpful in society? Do we want people doing that? What do you think about that? Because I think you're right. Some people might have that motivation. I don't think it's as strong as the other ones we just mentioned, but should we have people out there that the government is saying, no, the reason we have this law is because we don't want you to lose money? Do we want people to know that? Let's look at real quickly before we do the next video here. This is what I started you off with. You guys wrote it in your notes, so this is the first thing on your notes from last time. What does it mean to have economic freedom? Individuals have economic freedom when property they acquire without the use of force, fraud, or theft is protected from physical invasions by others, as they are free to use, exchange, or give their property as long as their actions don't violate. So do you have the right to lose money under that definition? No. Absolutely. That's what freedom is all about, right? And so, yeah, I would say there might be some motivations like that, but it's going against economic freedom that's trying to be measured. And that's part of the reason why in countries where they have more of that, they score less on the economic freedom index. Okay, so let's do the next one. The next one's called, I can't remember. Oh yeah, let's just call it Gone Wrong. This is another more stuff on licensing. So this is the fun.
Protesters and politicians agree wages should be higher. It's a fair. For years, America's minimum wage was $5.15 an hour.
This is minimum. So the minimum wage is a regulation that, of course, would affect businesses. So this one is on minimum wage. I was thinking it was a different one.
Last year, Congress raised it to $7.25.
That's our current.
14 states have gone further. Washington State, for example, guarantees workers $8.55 an hour.
Now 15.
Progressives say it should be higher.
Absolutely. What would that be about? That would be about $9 an hour.
Well, it's a nice idea.
Economist Russ Roberts points out setting minimums has unintended consequences.
First reaction is, we're going to get a raise. This is fantastic. I'm finally going to be able to buy this, that, and that, take care of my kids. Of course, it's part of the political field minimum wage.
That's the seen benefit.
That's the seen benefit, if you keep your job.
What happens if the government forced my company to increase wages?
You guys happy? You want that?
Aren't you guys, aren't you underpaid? Come on. So, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So let's give them a 50% raise. Your first thought is, that's awesome.
For a second, your second thought is, where is that going to keep as many camera people as they had before?
We quit hiring people without experience.
Merv Chris runs the Prime Cut, a combination meat counter and bar in Bakersfield, California.
Minimum wage jobs are an entry-level job to get someone some experience to do something. You raise that high enough, you cut those people out of the market completely.
When California's minimum wage rose to $8 an hour, he stopped hiring new people. Low-wage jobs used to be a way for kids and the unskilled to get into the labor force, to prove themselves. Most every gas station used to offer free window cleaning. Not anymore. The construction industry used to be a place teens could get a foot in the door, learn the discipline of regular work. But the minimum wage left many teens out of jobs. No wonder teen unemployment is 26%.
If they were to get rid of the minimum wage, we could easily hire more people.
Warren Myers manages public parks. When the minimum wage went up, he replaced workers with machines.
We're trying them out now, trying out various automatic gate solutions. I much prefer having a person, because that person can be friendly and provide a smile, and they can provide information about the park, and they can answer questions, and where are the bathrooms. But
with a higher minimum wage, he switched to automated ticket machines. Fewer people, more unemployment. In fact, unemployment has risen more in states that raised their minimum wage.
What would happen if we threw out the minimum wage?
Oh my goodness. What that leaves is an employer in a catbird seat to drive that wage as low as possible.
But wait a second. These businesses would like to pay their employees as little as possible, but they must pay more than minimum wage, because good workers have choices. At this bowling alley restaurant, most workers make more than the minimum, but they didn't start there.
now, minimum wage as dishwasher, which was like $3.75, $4 somewhere. It's been a while back.
Now he makes $10 an hour.
Why is it that only 5% or less than the American workforce earns the minimum wage? The other 95, 97% that earn more, why are they being paid so much? Is it because their employers just feel guilty paying them less?
No, it's because employers have to pay them extra to keep good workers. Kelsey started working here when she was just 13.
When I was 13, I think I was making a good amount of money. So, minimum wage is fine.
Now, Kelsey makes as much as $20 an hour.
If you work hard, you can make more. It's just, you have to prove yourself.
But had the minimum wage been what Senator Kennedy wanted,
increasing the minimum wage to $9.
Kelsey may have never had that chance. Her job might have disappeared.
Some business at the margin says, I can make money paying people $6 an hour. I can't make it paying them $7.25. I won't expand.
If the cost of expanding workers is too much for you to absorb, then you probably don't have the best business model going.
Whoa, that's harsh. That you deserve to fail? How does that help workers?
What could be more cruel than to raise your wage artificially and have no wage?
Higher unemployment thanks to government's good intentions.
Okay, get your last thoughts on that video. Okay, so are you believers or not? Should we have a higher minimum wage? This one emotionally, I think, is really hard to overcome, right? It's like, you know, people that are making 9 and they're scraping by, and it's like, maybe it should be, 15. Like, I support minimum wage. We're seeing a kind of creep up in different parts. So emotionally, this one's a little hard to overcome. So some comments?
Well, for places like California, it seems like they've already raised the minimum wage, but that's really because of cost of living, right?
Yeah, so their cost of living is higher.
Substantially higher on the list.
So is it helping them overall to have the minimum wage, I guess, is kind of the question. That's difficult.
Most jobs pay higher, like the minimum wage already to start, like Walmart's way above.
Okay, that's a good point to kind of kick things off, is that if the minimum wage is raised from $7.25 to $10 an hour, but your company's already paying 12, then it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't even affect you because you're already above the minimum. So the real question is when we have situations where people are below. And so states, as you're bringing up California and some other little higher cost of living states, those are having some higher minimum wages because of cost of living. So the federal wouldn't need to necessarily go up. States can kind of do their own thing on minimum wage if they choose to do so. But at the heart of the matter is, if minimum wage goes up, what do companies tend to do, or what do they need to do if they're in a competitive market where their prices are what they are? And then, so part of the argument is that, well, if we pass minimum wage, then all hamburger prices and, you know, the fast food restaurants or whatever, then they all are competing on a level ground, right? So that's one argument that could come back at it. But what will those companies continue to do if labor goes up from $7.25 to $12 or $15, pick a number? What might they start to do? Yeah, cut jobs, right? So things that they normally would, well, it's nice having an extra person to clean up the restaurant and clear trays or something. Well, we're going to have to cut that person, right? So they're going to always be looking, as that pressure goes up, somebody's going to lose their job. So our emotions immediately attach to the person that's actually going to get the 15. We don't think about the unemployed person that can't find a job. I can't find a job. There's nothing here. I'm going to have to leave California because I can't find a job, right? And so those businesses are having to cut back. They're also going to look for labor-saving equipment. What has McDonald's been? Have you guys noticed McDonald's made some changes in the last 5 years? It was a little experimental. It's not everywhere, but what are you doing at McDonald's now? Automated order it yourself, right? So minimum wage goes up to 15, and now we used to have 5 people running the registers, but now that I can have people order from an app or order from a kiosk, I can drop down to 3. So maybe I can have 2 less people, right? So the people who kept their job again are happy getting 15, but there's other people who didn't get a job. And so our emotions tend to follow the thought that it's going to improve people holding constant the amount of people working, but that's not economics. Price goes up, employers are going to cut back one way or the other. They might not be able to cut back like tomorrow for tomorrow's shift. If the law passed today, I might not be able to shift over. I have to invest in some of those new kiosks, right? I need to invest some money. But over the long haul, I'm going to look for labor-saving things.
I was just going to ask about Walmart.
Yeah.
The last few years, their minimum wage has gone up to like 11.
Yeah.
They've also got all this new self-checkout stuff, but
yeah,
they're still looking for more jobs.
Right. So in their case, it's a company-imposed minimum wage, right? So why would Walmart, low prices? So you might be kind of asking, Russ, I don't get it. You know, they're competitive, but yet now their minimum, which is a company-imposed minimum, is 12. Why? What do you think they found in the labor market?
To have a higher retention.
Higher retention, right? So good workers are coming and they want to get those jobs. Good. What else? What about the productivity of the people working? They might be higher because they don't want to lose their job. They're like, oh man, McDonald's is paying 10, but with Walmart I can work for 12. All of a sudden you're showing up on time, you look nice, you're being productive at work, right? So that is just a factor of labor market conditions. And so it's great when companies self-impose a minimum wage. They're doing it for profit reasons, right? Can we safely say Walmart is acting profit-minded when they go to 12, that they're not just giving charity out to raise it to 12? Of course, right? And that's awesome. That's what's great about the market system when it's voluntary. So what we're really focusing in on here is when somebody in Washington, D.C. says that it should be 12, right? Somebody who's disconnected from the boots on the ground and the real people who are working here, then we have laws being passed that are forcing that, not allowing the market to figure it out. So here in Ottawa too, pretty much low, no skill. You guys, some of you would know this. Minimum of $10 an hour. I think my son started working for the Price Chopper at $10.25, and he had no experience working in the deli and stuff. So that's pretty normal. Okay, good. Any other last comments or questions? Okay, so here was our little quiz question. Which of the following is not a way in which regulations help establish businesses? By reducing competition from entrepreneurs and new businesses. Which of these is not? A, B, or C? Which of these is not a way in which regulations help establish businesses by reducing competition? From C, right? So by assuring laws are evenly enforced. So we're not going to treat one industry different than another industry with licensing or something. Let's just have it be equal across the board on whatever. Maybe there is a minimum registration rule of if you're going to start a business, you need to be registered with the state. In the state of Kansas, I've set up a couple different limited liability companies for some rental properties that I have. And it took me 40 minutes to set up a company in the state of Kansas. All I had to do was register the papers, and boom, all of a sudden I'm a company. Now, I wasn't getting involved with some of these other things with particular business, but as far as establishing a legal entity with the state of Kansas, it took me 40 minutes. I knew what I was doing from other companies I set up in Iowa, but even if you came into it ice cold, maybe you'd have to spend an hour and a half, couple hours kind of figuring out, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to submit? But otherwise, it's pretty easy to start a business. And so that varies from state to state. Kansas is pretty good on that type of regulation. I'm going to get into, in fact, let me just flash it for you. Part of what we'll get into while we do this is that in addition to the world map, there is North America. And so here is freedom of the states. Kansas, I'm happy to report, right here is good old number 10. So same systems going on here in terms of state regulations and state taxes and other considerations from state to state. My formerly socialist state that I was raised in, Minnesota, is 41. So you're going to face higher regulations in those states. Texas, pretty free. Florida, pretty free. New York, 50. How many states are there in the nation? 50, right? So New York is awful in terms of their regulations and stuff that they have. California, 44. So different, these ideas are kind of filtering through at the state level as well. Okay, questions on that? What?
Number one.
Number one is New Hampshire, actually, yeah. Yep, New Hampshire. Texas is always kind of in the top 5. Florida maybe is number 2. Yeah, Florida is number 2. Some of these places do not have state income tax. We're going to get into taxes next, so I don't want to jump the gun too much, but that'll be part of the variation that we see across places. Okay, this next part is on capital markets. So in capital, when we talk about capital markets, what are we talking about in economics class? What was our loanable funds market kind of really trying to get at? Capital. Or just back to chapter 2, chapter 1 or 2. So land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, what's the capital bucket? Physical machines, buildings, stuff that makes other stuff, right? So this is what we're looking at here in the capital market. And we're going to do this little global village you can put on here. No, it's global village.
During the 1990s, technology continued to lift over natural worlds, spreading commerce and ideas.
It's hard to believe at the beginning of the 1990s, email was virtually unknown. Most people didn't have it. And a decade later, it was everywhere. It had just become part of people's lives. So this communications network so powerful. The price of telephone calls plummeted. The number of telephone calls around the world skyrocketed. And people are in contact and connected in a way that had never happened before.
In 2 decades, the number of international phone calls from the U.S. increased from 200 million to 5.2 million. This AT&T control center handles without even knowing. Consumers checking their credit card balance could be routed seamless to call centers like this one in India, where operators identify themselves with made-up American names.
Hey, this is Tracy. Let me know
In a remote Indian village, farmers took their crop to market as they had for generations. But an internet connection ensured they were now paying the world price for their crop, a price set at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange 8,000 miles away. This orderless world created a new kind of business person. Entrepreneurs could now think like multinationals and see the entire world as a single market. Mariana Roth understood this revolution earlier than most.
All of us believe in central planning. All of us believe in socialism because we are all children of a different generation. Then I realized that if you want to eradicate poverty, you don't do it by redistribution of existing wealth. You have to create new wealth.
With only 250 members, Murphy helped found a computer software company. Its headquarters in Bangalore became the world's second largest software campus. Only Microsoft's was bigger. 30% of the world's software engineers are from India.
I define globalization as using where it is most cost effective, selling where it is most profitable, sourcing capital from where it is cheapest without worrying about national economy.
What was that percent on software engineers? 30%. Insane. Yes.
Is that what we read about in Edward Baker book?
Yeah. I don't know if it was that company or not. All right. So what'd you get out of that? What was that first thing on international calls? Did somebody get that note? I think that should be in everybody's notes here. 200 million to 5.2 billion. So Jim Gortney is actually, he just emailed me, I think, on something too. He's written some recent papers on what he calls the communication and transportation revolution. So we had the industrial revolution, but the stuff that's gone on in the last 20 years since the 1990s, like this video just showed, is really, truly amazing. So we're opening up the world, right, to be able to do exchanges. And part of it is through the communication. They showed the call center in India. There was another thing that blew my mind. Can't remember if I shared this with you guys before or not, but you go to Wendy's and the person says, "Hi, may I take your order?" Right? And blah, 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 you do your order. That person is sitting in India. They started doing that because they found people who were well-trained. Like when you're through the drive-through even, "Can I take your order?" Of course, you're thinking that they're just inside, like normal, but they're actually taking your order from India. Isn't that amazing to think about? So then what that helped is they could have very well-trained specialists in India that can help increase sales. Would you like to supersize that? All that stuff, right? So they have people that are doing it. Not only that, but that person in India, once they finish that call from Ottawa, Kansas, they might be picking an order up from Kansas City, right? So their phone just goes up. "Hi, may I take your order?" It doesn't matter to them whether they're in Kansas City or Ottawa. And so now they're getting that level of service that's consistent for the company as they go through the drive-thru. Just little innovations like that, it just blows you away, right, on how the global economy is transforming and what that does from an economist perspective of moving resources to other places. So we have the human capital aspect that was kind of shown in the video, as well as physical capital. Give me a takeaway from what I guess we did a couple of, did anybody have any other last things to say? Yeah. Yeah, the farmers. Yeah, that was really cool, isn't it? That we have a global market for that so that they can be getting the highest price, and they actually know what price they can get, right? So when I was in India, this was 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I had better internet connection than in my freaking office here in Ottawa, Kansas. Seriously, the internet, and I was in rural, middle of nowhere India, and I had better access. So farmers there can access what they could get for their crops potentially, again, through these world markets and through communication. So pretty cool stuff. Any other last comments there? All right, so our next section brings in money. So we talked a lot about money, so I'm just going to show one video from this. We had the quantity theory of money that you had on your test. And let me just blow this up real quick before we jump into the video. I don't know if you guys can even see it. It's so small. It's still pretty small. This shows money growth and inflation, and it just shows through countries around the world how connected that is, which is what Milton Friedman. So this next video has Friedman in it. So we'll get in. So call this money and, let's just say money.
The reason we have inflation in the United States, or for that matter anywhere in the world, is because these pieces of paper and the accompanying bookends for their counterparts in other nations
That's a young
are growing more rapidly than the quantity of goods and services produced. The truth is, inflation is made in one place and one place only, here in Washington. This is the only place where there are presses like this that turn out these pieces of paper we call money. This is the place where the power resides to determine how rapidly the amount of money shall increase.
I think we'll get out of the spectrum here pretty soon.
What happened to all that noise? That's what would happen to inflation if we stopped letting the amount of money grow so rapidly. This is not a new idea. It's not a new cure. It's not a new problem. It's happened over and over again in history. Sometimes inflation has been cured this way on purpose. Sometimes it's happened by accident. During the Civil War, the North, late in the Civil War, overran the place in the South where the printing presses were setting up, where the pieces of paper were being turned out. Prior to that point, the South had had a very rapid inflation. If my memory serves me right, something like 4% a month. It took the Confederacy something over 2 weeks to find a new place where they could set up their printing presses and start them going again. During that 2-week period, inflation came to a halt. After the 2-week period, when the presses started running again, inflation started up again. It's that clear, that straightforward. More recently, there's another dramatic example of the only effective way to deal with rampant inflation.
In 1973, Japanese housewives going to market were faced with an unpleasant fact. The cash in their purses seemed to be losing its value. Prices were starting to soar as the awful story of inflation began to unfold once again. The Japanese government knew what to do. What's more, they were prepared to do it. When it was all over, economists were able to record precisely what had happened. In 1971, the quantity of money started to grow more rapidly. As always happens, inflation wasn't affected for a time. But by late 1972, it started to respond. In early 73, the government reacted. It started to cut monetary growth, but inflation continued to soar for a time. The delayed reaction made 1973 a very tough year of recession. Inflation tumbled only when the government demonstrated its determination to keep monetary growth in check. It took 5 years to squeeze inflation out of the system. Japan had attained relative stability. Unfortunately, there's no way to avoid the difficult road the Japanese had to follow before they could have both
low inflation, and a healthy economy. First, they had to live through a recession until slow monetary growth had its delayed effect on inflation.
Inflation is just like alcoholism. In both cases, when you start drinking or when you start printing too much money, the good effects come first, and the bad effects only come later. That's why, in both cases, there's a strong temptation to overdo it, to drink too much and to print too much money. When it comes to the cure, it's the other way around. When you stop drinking or when you stop printing money, the bad effects come first, and the good effects only come later. That's why it's so hard to persist with the cure.
I didn't remember that part. That's freaking awesome. All right. So money is like alcoholism, or inflation is like alcoholism, I think is what he said. So why is it that way? We kind of talked about this in our last chapter, your material that's due for this weekend on the short run aggregate supply curve. What was held fixed along the short run aggregate supply curve? What was held fixed? I didn't mean to throw you we've had such fun now with these videos and stuff, but let's do a quick little graph here. Short run aggregate supply. Resource prices, good. So the price level looked like this, and so resource prices were held fixed at like $10. So the idea here is we might get a bump up in real GDP with a money supply shift. So aggregate demand, one of the shifters is money, right? If we increase money like Milton was saying here, then that could give us a nice little bump in the meantime. And so that might be okay, like an acceptable level of inflation. Prices are going good, right? We're starting to get a little drunk. It's like, oh, I'm having fun. I got a little buzz. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's having fun, right? And then once the resource prices start to kick in and inflation starts to really grab hold, it can get out of control, right? So the lag time between output price adjustment and resource price adjustment is kind of his analogy back to maybe getting into some alcohol or other things. And then you stop drinking and you're still not having fun as you drive the porcelain bus or something. Right? You guys know about driving the porcelain bus? So some people are like, oh yeah, I've driven that bus. So if you've done a little too much drinking, you might end up having to have the contents of your stomach come up. So driving the porcelain bus, driving the porcelain bus, baby, big old steering wheel. Everybody got that now? Glad I could teach you something here, right? Driving the porcelain bus, yes. Okay, so that's our money. Our next section is going to look at taxes. And remember, in regard to economic freedom, you know, what's wrong with taxes? You can make the same, we need taxes, we need police, we need this, and that's all true. That's totally true. But in terms of your freedom, if we go back to the definition of what is economic freedom, that you're free to do with your own earnings what you wish. If the government has higher tax rates, you're getting less money. So in terms of measuring your personal economic freedom to do with what you wish with your income, higher tax rates does mean less freedom. So that's part of the tie-in here overall to economic freedom. I forgot, I did want to ask, did anybody else have anything on the money? I thought the alcohol thing was so funny, but any other notes that you thought was a good takeaway? Hopefully that kind of helped with some of the stuff we were talking about before in the previous chapters too. Good? Burning like, oh, I wish he would have asked questions because I wanted to say this one. Okay, low tax rates, here we go. So low tax rates, you can call this on your notes.
Poor Beth, she's experiencing tax shock for the first time. Have you ever experienced paycheck sticker shock? That's when you get your paycheck, look at what you earned, look at all the deductions for taxes, and go into shock. When you saw what you took home, what was left to use for yourself, did you ever think, well, hey, I'll just take a couple of hours off next week. After all, I'm not going to lose that much money by doing that. It's a natural reaction. The cost of working those hours in terms of leisure has gone up, and the cost of taking a few hours off has gone down. So you make the logical decision, you're going to be less productive. People tend to be much more productive when they're allowed to keep more of what they make. Think about it. You work hard. You want to be able to keep as much as possible from that hard work. Incentives matter, right? So the higher the incentive, the more likely you are to work. The lower the incentive, the less likely you are to work. The idea is captured by the Laffer curve, named after economist Art Laffer. Laffer argued that if taxes were too high, people would lose incentive to work hard. Too low, and the government would not bring in enough revenue to operate. While even Laffer himself does not know what rate would maximize both revenue and incentive to work, the Laffer curve points out what we're discovering. If taxes are too high, people are going to look for legal ways to shelter their money, even offshore, where the government will not benefit from taxation. Some even will seek illegal ways, a black market created mostly by a gross misalignment of incentives through the legal regulatory environment. The highest bracket of the federal income tax rate under President Franklin Roosevelt was 91%. While later rescinded by Congress, he even mandated a 100% tax rate on earnings above, in today's dollars, $361,000. Ask yourself, how hard would you work if 100% passed a certain amount, or even if 91% of all your earnings were taken from you? This alignment of incentives can have a huge impact on an entire society. Imagine for a moment if everyone decided to take more hours off. If everyone became less productive, society would be, as a whole, be less productive, and the revenues needed to fund government would decline. When taxes are in a reasonable range, more people are inclined to pay them and not find shelters, legal or otherwise, for their money. Most countries keep their top tax rates for individuals between 15 and 45%. High tax rates are another example of those unforeseen secondary effects we've been investigating. Taxation is something else that needs to be balanced. As the amount taken from individuals increases, the benefits of working decrease. When we tax anything at a high rate, we get less of it. We know this with cigarettes, but it is true with labor, too. When tax incentives are aligned properly, workers are more motivated to work to their potential. A hard-working labor force, taking advantage of specialization, will produce products and services best suited to its land, labor, capital, and technology. This will allow it to sell goods and services that it can produce at a relatively low cost, and buy those that would be costly to produce domestically. Comparative advantage. Do what you do best and trade for the rest. This is true for individuals, and it is also true for nations. Free trade helps nations to flourish and raise the living standards of people. We'll look at taxes and international trade more closely in this module.
Okay, so get your notes down there. So, would we ever have in the United States, what do you think the highest tax rate we'd have in the United States? 30%? 30%? 39.5 is actually the highest federal tax rate on our income currently. So we're kind of in that sweet spot where they have. So does that mean, how does that work then? Do you guys pay 40% if you're making $15,000 a year?
Brackets.
There's brackets. So if you are currently in a 10% bracket making $15,000 a year, but you're going to go into a higher bracket, let's say it goes from 10% to 20%, if you make $16,000 a year. Would you want to make that extra $1,000? No, it wouldn't have the same incentive. Well, we haven't answered that. That's not the way tax rates work. We'll spend a little bit more time, but just to kind of plant a seed that we'll spend maybe a little more detail on. This section here of the book talks about marginal tax rates. And so how that works is that you get 10% is your tax rate on your first, and go ahead and write this down on your notes. So tax rates, let's call this marginal tax rates. That's what we really have is marginal tax rates. So your tax rate is 15% for income $0 to $15,000 using my example. And then let's say your tax rate is 20% if you hit the next bracket, which is basically 15 up to, let's say, 30,000. I'm just making up numbers, by the way. So how much money do I owe the government? If your income is 16,000, you are not going to pay 20% on the whole 16, only the extra 1,000. So how we calculate tax in the United States is very important, and it applies this marginal rate. So with 16,000, I would have 10% tax times 15,000, which gives me $1,500 of tax. And I'd have 20% on 1,000, which would be just $200. And so my total tax bill that I owe the IRS is $1,700. Okay? So that's an important concept with kind of with the way the rates happen. Any questions on that? Again, we'll talk more about it at a future time. All right. Questions, other comments on the tax video? It's kind of a cute little thing. Let's go. Raising taxes typically results in people doing each of the following except A, B, or C. Working harder to make up lost time, changing their investment decisions to avoid taxes, working less because there's less incentive to be productive. Raising taxes typically results in people doing each of the following except A, working harder to take up the lost time, right? They're not going to work harder usually. They're going to try to avoid the taxes. And so, just kind of a cute little thing. Can I write off last year's taxes as a bad investment? What do your taxes go for is kind of an important part. What are you getting out of your taxes, right? So if we're getting good stuff, we might more willingly pay our taxes. We need taxes to be paid, and we need good government. All right, this next piece is under free trade, which we've talked a lot about. So I'm going to skip that section. So we're not going to have a video on the free trade section. And I want to do this one. This is kind of cool. In the video, Jim Gwartney is being interviewed on this section. So this is kind of the conclusion to this part 2. And he talks about the economic freedom we'll discuss here. 5-minute video. Call this economic freedom index, or freedom. You can just call it freedom index if you want.
Here today to meet with the authors of the Economic Freedom of the World report and to find out about their process of measuring countries like Zambia.
This is Jim.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. What is this report and how does it work?
Well, it's really an effort to view the world through the lens of opportunity and control over one's life. Essentially, institutions and policies influence the opportunities that individuals have in terms of choosing their own occupations, choosing entrepreneurial activities, engaging in trading with people, and perhaps most importantly, the opportunity to keep what they earn. And we thought it would be interesting to see how those changes affect the economic freedom of people.
So the idea was to try to quantify this. So we had to collect data on a lot of countries, data from the World Bank, the IMF, other reputable sources, and then we put it all into the computer. We worked on it for many, many years. Jim had some health problems and lost his eyesight, so that set us back a little bit, but we persevered, and after almost 7 or 8 years, we finally came out with a good report.
So you're basically looking at the kind of things that would give people power over their incomes, their wealth, their jobs, the freedom to start a business, to trade.
Precisely.
So guys, you've been using this report to rank countries for the past 17 years. What have you learned from the analysis of the data?
Well, One of the most important things we learned is that countries that are economically more free grow more rapidly and achieve higher income levels. And in fact, not just a little bit higher income levels, but a lot higher income levels. For example, the per person income of the highest quartile, the highest 1/4 of economically free countries is 7 times what the figure is for the lowest group. So that's a huge difference.
But it's not just about rising incomes overall, it's also about the poorest of the poor. If we look at that bottom quartile, the poorest 10% of those societies have average incomes of about $1,200 per capita. If we look at the upper quartile, the most free quartile, they have average incomes of over $11,000. Now, that's not a lot to live on, but it's a whole lot more than $1,200.
So as people work their way out of poverty, that's a substantial improvement in their quality of life.
It's not just about the quality of life, it's about the quantity of life. If we look at the most free countries and compare them to the least free countries, the most free countries have substantially higher life expectancy, 18 years.
You know, a lot of that relationship is probably driven by the fact that more free countries have higher incomes, better sanitation, nutrition, things like that. You know, if you live to be 80 versus 60, that's the difference between getting to know your grandkids, see your grandkids grow up, see your great-grandchildren. Economic freedom is sure it's about income, it's about growth, but it's also about quality of life and knowing your grandkids are gone. And if you have more economic freedom, you have a better chance of knowing your grandkids. And that's more important or as important as how many cars are in the driveway, things like that.
For over 30 years, the United States was around 3rd place. But in this latest report, the US is at 90. Why? What happened?
Well, the biggest single factor contributing to the U.S. decline is the decline in the legal structure area and protection of property rights. From the wars on drugs and terror to the more widespread use of eminent domain to take property from one party and transfer it to another, to the auto bailout, which tended to undermine the property rights of bondholders.
Well, generally, the Economic Freedom Index is showing a rise of economic freedom around the world, and only a handful of countries are decreasing.
Some people object to economic freedom because they think it's just freedom for the well-off, for the big businesses and for those who already have power. What's your take on that?
I think if you look at the U.S. In response to kind of the financial crisis, what did we get? We got greater concentration in the banking industry. It's harder to be a local bank, local savings and loan. The banking interests and banking lobbyists used the opportunity of the financial crisis to solidify their position in the marketplace. That's not economic freedom, right? That's antithetical to economic freedom.
All those lobbyists that those corporations hire and they send to the national capital, they're not arguing for more economic freedom, they're arguing for less, they're arguing for special privileges.
Oppression of economic freedom is kind of subtle, and it goes under the radar, and fewer people notice it. And that's what makes it very difficult to defend.
That's the beautiful thing about this Economic Freedom of the World report. It makes these trends visible. It tells us where to look, it gets us talking about it. That's why we do this.
That's why we do this. That's why I write about it, and that's why we talk about it. Guys, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, get your last notes down on that one. All right, so some takeaways from that video. Let's start with some of the most important things. U.S. is terrible in economic freedom. That was, they made that video, that was the lowest they've been in a while, but we're 5, remember, today. We did bounce back. Part of that would be, you know, Trump, love him or hate him, the stuff that he's done in terms of regulation has been probably the biggest part. But we also had a revision of the tax code too. So there, but the regulation part was really big. They wanted to, his goal was to have, for every new regulation created, 3 have to disappear. And by the way, there's lots of low-hanging fruit of like, well, that's a stupid regulation. We haven't enforced that for 40 years, right? Well, it turned out during the Trump administration, the last 2, whatever it's been now, I guess it's 4 years, it's been 22 eliminated for every 1 new one. So that was just a huge momentum into kind of getting people thinking about business and entrepreneurship and other things. So I think that's been a real, one of the largely understated positive effects policy changes that were done in the last 4 years. And so anyway, good news is we're back up, kind of tied right with Canada in that number 5 position. We did rebound. Another thought from that video. Life expectancy goes up with income. Good, life expectancy. I hope that one really hits you guys hard because some of you are not too far over 18 years of age, right? It's like your whole life compared to living in a not so free country versus a free country like the United States, that we actually have that time. Yeah, there's a lot of real family type effects. It goes well beyond the money. What was it with the poor? That's one that I do with our Gortney Institute a lot. How much richer were the poor in our country compared to others?
About $11,000.
11,000 compared to, what was the poor? 1,200. And by the way, that's all been adjusted by that stuff that we learned in class with, you heard them say purchasing power or purchasing power parity, so PPP. All of those incomes have been adjusted for exchange rates and purchasing power and inflation, called purchasing power parity. So it's a real 1,200. Like if a piece of candy is $1 for a Snickers bar is $1, it's 1,200 Snicker bars versus 12,000 Snicker bars. It's real purchasing power in terms of material prosperity. Pretty important stuff. That's why I'm kind of passionate about it. I hope you can start to be passionate about it too. All right, turn in your notes. We're done. Let's see. The attendance sheet. I failed again to do that. Yeah, let's do the attendance sheet though, because I need to get that. Where is my attendance sheet? I even kind of pulled it out. Yeah, I did. So as you guys turn yours in, you can do attendance. Get John Henry on there. And then you can just keep a heads up. I'll probably end up emailing, or maybe we'll end up waiting until Monday, but you might get a code with the email to get this content for next week. Oh, the banking regs. Just as a little side for some of you, the number of banks in the United States in the last 20, 30 years has gone from like 12,000 banks to 6,000 banks. We're like cut in half. So the whole family-owned bank and all that, and a lot of that's due to the regulations, what they're saying in that video.